the state would not be so important in Holland as the three columns, the Catholic column, the Protestant column, and the Socialist column. And those columns, they did a lot and were masters of a lot of development in their society. So, in that respect, it was, and that played later a very important role. There was also so important the probation society, which was the probation organization, which was part of criminal justice, but also not part, because nobody in criminal justice had power over the probation sector. It was an independent sector. And that sector, then what had first been a voluntary sector, and it was a very old sector. The probation service existed already from 1850. And then sometimes they had been with the prisoners, against the bad condition of the prison. And sometimes they had been with the people who imprisoned, wanting to change the prisoners. And so there have been different times in its existence. And now, when those volunteers were replaced by trained social workers, those social workers wanted to have the accused persons and the detained persons as their clients. That meant that, for example, when they brought a report about such a person, they did not bring the report if the person they reported about would not agree. Then they did not change the report, but then they did not give a report. Anyway, the person they were talking about had a right to say if he accepted the report or not. And the most important thing was, in a way, that when they made reports about the context also of what happened. Now, the specific thing of criminal justice, when you compare it, you are never talking here about civil justice. And because I'm also a lawyer, and I think that civil justice is so important and so profoundly different from criminal justice. But everything which is illegal in criminal justice is also so in civil justice, and can also be approached in civil justice, and often is approached in civil justice. A lot of criminalizable events are dealt with in civil justice, but when they are reconstructed in civil justice, they look naturally different. And that's also so nice to make studies about that. How for everybody, everything is different. If it is dealt with in that other context, and the link between those two is never linked. But it is very important for everybody who is living and working in that field to look the whole time also at civil justice. Now, what those probation officers were doing, that was depicting a non-restrictive image of the event. And it is that specific restriction of the definition of the event which makes also the reconstruction of reality in criminal justice untrue. All what is created without such an addition in criminal justice is a non-valid reconstruction of reality according to generally accepted rules how you reconstruct reality. That was one thing. That probation service was organized in the three columns, but at a certain moment the three columns came together, and that made it a much more powerful institution. And that much more powerful institution then said, if we want to do something for those people related to criminal justice, then it is very important that we influence the media, because the media play such a central role in the ideas which people have in society about what is going on, what happened, what sort of negative things happened, and how you can do something about it. So the probation service attracted good, efficient, and respected journalists, and those journalists brought a regular publication. But the most important thing was that they were the place where the newspapers and anyway the serious press was always going for information. And that had a big influence on the general thing in society. Then, it was not only in a probation service, but also in a wider sense in the country that social work was spread. And not only the form of social work of having a client who is in trouble, but also that form of social work which is helping communities which are in a process of change to organize their own power and to make face to new problems. And that sort of situation brought together with a sort of movement of change in the police, which went on in that period, and which was in the first place really started inside the police itself, not from the outside. The police was not forced to change, but the number of policemen thought that it was wrong how the police had begun. And those processes of change inside the police led to many forms of working together between those more society-changing forms of social work and the police. Yeah, and in that whole context then, and so there were good relationships with some politicians, and in this process also was a very important thing, the whole change in the universities by the student revolt, which was not so very revolting in order, but on the other hand, wanted really change, and that student activity in nearly all universities had in the whole field of activities in criminal justice very important consequences. Because before, those different sort of lawyers and different sort of social sciences were together in small, separated companies. And the people who were in prison were not represented there. And also the other disciplines were not represented there. But under the influence of those students, that led to a different organization of the academic world and to a form of having congresses and regular communities in which also always prisoners were present, and in which, for example, drug users were present and had their own word and talked about their own reality.